So the University of the Pacific's Business Forecast Center did some research for us, and they found a couple things. One of the things they found was that of the 15 mega regions in the state, our mega region was ranked 14th in terms of human capital. Not meaning our folks are bad necessarily, but in terms of the skills needed for the workforce that exists, we're 14th out of the 15 mega regions in the state. And that's bad enough, but what makes it worse is that we're between the San Francisco mega region and the Sacramento mega region, which are ranked number 1 in terms of human capital, we're number 3. Meaning that all the jobs are there, but all the housing is here, which helps explain some of our housing affordability issues. So last year, during State of the City, we spent a lot of time talking about we're going to work with UOP and Valley Vision with funding from JP Morgan to really look at a workforce development action plan for the city of Stockton. And to join me to talk about that initiative and others, I'm joined by a Fuse Corps fellow in my office, Ms. Ann Rogan.
Thanks for having me on your show today.
No problem. So, can you please help me start by talking about this workforce development action plan? Mm-hmm. What is it? Why should we be excited? Is this just another report that's going to sit on the shelf?
Well, it is a report. The idea is for it not to sit on the shelf, and I'll tell you how we're going to do that. So a couple things. You mentioned that the University of the Pacific was involved. They were deeply involved and deeply helpful. We also partnered with Valley Vision, and really the goal of the report was to look at and understand the human capital challenges that North San Joaquin Valley has. But more than that, to look at how do we put Stockton on a different economic trajectory altogether, and not sort of understanding the problems and the challenges, but not dwelling on them. And I think recognizing that we brought together the business community, the higher education community, the K through 12 community, really around sort of trying to understand what are the challenges. What I noticed in particular is that everyone was saying the same thing, but in very different language. And so part of the goal of the report was to figure out what's the common framework and the common language that we can all speak about the future of work and how we want to think about the jobs that are available today, but go beyond that and think about where jobs coming from in the next 2 to 5 to 10 years. And I think that we now have a framework where we can literally say to an organization, how are you going to commit to tackling one of these areas that's in sort of this report.
And what's fascinating, we've said in many meetings about this, and part of the findings of the report, which will be out online right after this actually, is that over half the jobs, like 52% of the jobs in our county and city are minimum wage jobs. Meaning we want people to have a living wage, we want people to be able to provide for themselves, we want people to spend their tax dollars, but the majority of jobs are minimum wage, meaning that after housing and utilities, there's not much left there to spend. So we made a decision as a group to pivot and say, we know where we are today, but how do we build for the future? And that's why the stuff we're doing with Stockton Scholars and other things are so important.
Well, I think on that point, you mentioned at the beginning that North San Joaquin Valley has a relatively low human capital index. And you talked about sort of the graduation rates for folks that have completed college. If you look at the state, 62% of Californians have some college, so not necessarily a graduate, and it's 49% in Stockton. So even folks that have gone through a portion of that, the percentage is still actually relatively low. And that then paints sort of a grim picture about how you prepare for and acquire the skills that are needed to go forward.
So, and I know we're still building it out, but there are a couple things you can share around kind of what are we doing to make that report actionable? Are there pilots we're running? Are there folks coming in to help us?
Yeah, and so there's two things, sort of two paths that diverge. And one is sort of further research and understanding sort of additional skills gap data that we don't yet have. And so we're working with UOP and other partners to sort of identify what those barriers are. The other path that I'm really excited about is sort of the prototyping path. So what can we literally try with two constraints? One of which is what can we try within 3 months, so relatively fast turnaround, and under $15,000 to identify challenges that are coming out of what we're calling the Skills Pact. And so literally an organization would say, I want to commit to figuring out how we teach college graduates or high school graduates skills in a different way. And then we sort of will run a pilot around that, committing to identify the problem, committing to find the funding for it, and then sharing out the learnings with the greater body of organizations that have committed to that.
And switching a little bit, I know a lot of the research talks about the best way to grow an economy is not to wait for a Tesla to come, which is great, but to really support small businesses and entrepreneurs. So, and also this idea of an innovation economy. So can you first talk about some of the stuff we've been doing in the office around supporting small businesses and entrepreneurs? And then also, can you talk a little bit about the work we've been doing with City Lab about how do we create an innovation ecosystem?
Sure. Yeah, so two things. One, our office has been working with sort of outside organizations, one of which is Kiva. And Kiva, for those who do or do not know, is a sort of a platform that enables entrepreneurs to crowdsource loans for their businesses. So we introduced Kiva to the city of Stockton last year, funded about 4 entrepreneurs, which is really exciting. And in parallel, have been holding small business roundtables that sort of focus on a place in the city or a demographic of small businesses that we really want to understand better about and identify the patterns and sort of the needs that come out of that. But linked to that is City Lab. So City Lab, for those who may be familiar, is an online publication that's a division of The Atlantic. And they focus on urban challenges and solutions. They thought so much of Stockton, maybe basic income has something to do with it, and flew themselves out to Stockton and offered to write a report for free, so no cost to the city.
I'm good at this free money thing, y'all. I think I figured that thing out.
You have. You cornered the market on that one. And they basically said, look, we want to come to Stockton. We want to interview philanthropic leaders, business leaders, community leaders, education leaders, and we want to sort of assess for you where your economy falls relative to other cities in the country, and understanding that you can push an innovation-based economy. What does that mean? So that's an economy that's based off of entrepreneurship, looking and understanding about the role of small business. And so, I look at this, I think about the report, the Status of Women report that was launched earlier this year, and you look at unemployment, female unemployment. Female unemployment in Stockton is 14%, which is double the national average. So when you think about opportunities to make that City Lab report actionable, you think about the role of small business and female entrepreneurship, frankly. And thinking about our proximity to the Bay Area, that's a hugely underutilized asset, and figuring out how do we change our relationship with our neighboring regions.
And then one of the other things we're doing in terms of preparing is this idea of opportunity zones. In this tax plan, we're still trying to figure it out, but there's a chance for cities to use other people's money to invest in some distressed areas in their communities. Can you talk about sort of the work we're doing to organize ourselves around that?
Yeah, so opportunity zones, as you mentioned, came out of the 2017 tax bill. And the goal really here, it's a community development tool at the end of the day. Provides a tax incentive to private investors to reinvest their capital gains in distressed communities. So that's an explicit focus of opportunity zones, the tool. And so cities around the country are grappling with how to take advantage of this and how to position themselves appropriately. The big question is, how are the Oaklands and the Santa Rosas and the San Jose's thinking about this, and where does Stockton fall into that pool? So I'm excited because I think there's still time. There's still sort of criteria as to how money actually flows into cities and the legalities around that. But now really is the time between now and midsummer to figure out how do we want to build a really powerful coalition of business and civic leaders to identify where the investment opportunities are. So it could be in downtown, it could be in South Stockton, it could be in North Stockton, but nearly the entire city has been designated by the governor's office as an opportunity zone. So that's the good news and the bad news.
This is an amazing opportunity.
It's the opportunity of opportunity zones.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Ann. And if people want to get involved and help with the opportunity zone stuff, the workforce development stuff, or any of the things we discussed today, you can just go to the website, michaeldtubbs.com, and we'll plug you with the appropriate person. So, Ann, thank you for your time. Looking forward to the opportunities presented today to invest in our community and grow our economy for the future.
Thank you very much. Take care.